You're listening to All Kinds of Catholic with me, Teresa Alessandro. My conversations with different Catholics will give you glimpses into some of the ways we're living our faith today. Pope Leo, quoting St. Augustine, reminds us, "Let us live well, and the times will be good. We are the times." I hope you'll feel encouraged and affirmed, and sometimes challenged, as I am in these conversations. Join our podcast community, get news and background information about the conversations, and share your thoughts if you want to. You can get the newsletter and each episode straight to your inbox by going to allkindsofcatholic.substack.com and clicking on subscribe. It's free. That web address is in the episode notes too, and I'd love you to draw closer to our community. Thank you. Listeners, thank you for joining today's conversation. I'm here in Bishop Stortford today, which is in the Diocese of Westminster. I'm in the parish of St. Joseph. If you haven't been here, I recommend a visit. It's absolutely beautiful. Beautiful big grounds and wonderful facilities. And I'm here with Sophie. Welcome, Sophie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're doing a special episode today that is in collaboration with Radio Maria. So Helena's here from Radio Maria too, and all the Radio Maria kit. I'm grateful to Helena for organising this for us. Let's talk then, Sophie. There's lots to talk about your current work here in the parish, but let's go back in time a little bit and perhaps you'd tell us about, are you someone who's always been a Catholic? Have you become a Catholic later? What's your story?
Yeah, thank you, Teresa. Really good to be here and to share. Yeah, it's quite a typical story in a way, in that I am a born and bred Catholic. I was baptised in the Church of St. Thomas's in Canterbury, in Kent. A loving family, parents who wonderfully are still married after very many years of marriage and have been a great example to us children. So just kind of grew up, and I've got two siblings, an older brother and a younger sister. Just a really happy upbringing, very much sort of church-centred. We'd make the pilgrimage from the village where we lived outside of Canterbury into the town for Mass, and it was a familiar space. It was a place I knew. I made my first Holy Communion and first reconciliation there, and then actually after my first Holy Communion we moved to London. So that was quite a big thing for us. My dad got a new job and we up sticks and moved to North London, which felt like a big change, and the big city, and it started new schools and things. I mean, I myself, I was one of those children, I think, but I remember distinctly as a sort of probably a 5 or 6 year old starting to write my own prayers. I was just that kind of, I don't know, faith always just kind of sparked something in me, and I was quite a faith-filled and joy-filled child. I think I probably took my optimism and my joyfulness from my dad. Later on, as a teen, I remember having those really lovely sort of long late-night conversations with my mum, and she'd kind of, we'd just solve the world's problems together, and just felt very much like both of them sharing that love they had for each other with their children in a really wonderful way, always very committed to us, very child-centred, but each in their own way, sort of sparking faith in me, probably without realising it. I just got a lot from their love and their example, and the opportunity to talk and be open and have questions. But we were very much rooted in weekly Mass and prayer.
That sounds like a very blessed childhood, to have two parents who understand their faith and can share it with you in everyday conversations. I guess there's people listening for whom that's not the case. We don't necessarily know how to talk about our faith very well with our children. And was there a time when you wobbled a little bit as you were growing up, or it sounds like you had such a good foundation that it's just stood you in good stead?
Yeah, well, I'd say from my parents, it was very much their example. They just lived by example. I think that was the main thing. My dad was a social worker, so, just the care that he gave people, like you just saw it kind of come through their personality and the way they did things. I remember when I was about 12, I very much wanted to know what I was going to do in life, and I got my dad to take me down to the library and we'd look at all these books as to what I was going to do. And already then I thought, I could become a nun or something like it. Faith was part of it then. But I remember at one point, you do question, you in the early teens and you're questioning things. But I made a sort of a distinct decision. I'm going to listen in Mass, and I'm going to listen to what it's about, and I'm going to actually make a decision here. Is this something I want to kind of be part of my life? And I remember doing that, for a little while, just really trying to concentrate and say, what messages am I hearing? What are we saying when we say the things in Mass? The responses that you say sort of almost, if you're born and bred Catholic, it kind of trips off the tongue.
Yep.
And I remember sort of making that decision in me. I'm going to actually listen and focus and think, what is this? And choosing it for myself. I made the decision that, yes, this was something that interested me, that gave me life. I think we had good communities both in Canterbury and when we moved to London. And then my parents were also part of the Teams of Our Lady. It's an international organisation, and they were very involved for many years with the Teams of Our Lady. So we get another opportunity to do family events and come together and just see, I suppose, faith outside the four walls. And I think all of those things meant that there were times, of course, where I questioned, but led me to a positive desire to seek faith and to be part of it.
That Teams of Our Lady takes me right back, because I think I had a guest from New Zealand one time in the earlier days of the podcast, and I think she and her husband were part of Teams of Our Lady in New Zealand. And that's just reminded me that we were talking before recording that you have quite a lot of different international heritages in your family. So tell us a bit about that, because we were saying before, because the church is international, it's really lovely to hear these international flavours coming through.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's been part of my upbringing. I mean, the Teams of Our Lady was couples from all over, even though it was English, the branch of the Teams of Our Lady, you met people from all over. And it really reminded me that the church is universal. I mean, my dad comes from India, originally from Calcutta, and he came via a ship for 3 months sailing around the Cape of South Africa to make his way as a 7-year-old or 8-year-old to the UK. But of Christian origin, they were Catholics. My mum is from France, and she and my dad met in Regent's Park, with him with a pen friend and she with the pen friend. And by the time they walked back to their hotel, they had struck up a friendship and a conversation. And then I think Dr. Zhivago was the first thing they went to see, and that sealed it. So I've got the French Anglo-Indian, but obviously some European origin and things in there somewhere. And then my husband is from Zimbabwe. So now, being married to my husband and with my children, we have a bit of Zimbabwean, South African roots in Scotland and Germany and France. But it really is lovely, because, when I met my husband, when he said he first came to England to find work here, the Catholic Church was his place to land in a way. And I found the same. We used to go to France and we used to spend summers there. And even though it was a different language, Mass was there, you knew to follow, there was a comfort. And even in Bishop's Stortford here, we've got the Stansted Airport close by. So I'd say a vast majority of the town have some link with Stansted hostesses and pilots and all sorts of things, or just people that have come to live here because of option to travel. So, a huge Eastern European community, for many years, Italians and so forth. But more recently as well, people from the Asian continent, African. I mean, it's really is a melting pot. And we see that in our local primary school especially. It's really wonderful. And the church brings everyone together. I do feel everywhere I've been in the world, I've travelled to all sorts of places and had the privilege of doing so. And the Catholic Church has always just been that anchor, that sort of landing place. And it feels like home.
That's great. Thank you, Sophie. And that is making me think that presumably the parish community here is also people from all over the world together.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, there's a real vibrancy here. It's really wonderful.
So may we fast forward then to your catechetical work a little bit? I was looking at the parish website before I came, and I see that not only are you a catechist, but you actually coordinate the catechetical work in the parish somehow. So tell us a bit about that then, because I'm guessing some people listening, maybe their parish doesn't have so much catechesis, so don't need a coordinator, and other people might be thinking, I wish we had a coordinator. Tell us a bit about how that came about and what that looks like.
Yeah, it's a varied role, and actually some parishes do have a coordinator, but a voluntary role. I mean, I'm very blessed here that I'm paid for the role, employed by the Diocese of Westminster. I've actually been working for the diocese for a number of years. But yeah, being catechetical coordinator is really just overseeing all the catechetical programmes. So yeah, it starts from baptism. It's actually my husband and I run the baptism course. We did as a volunteer even before I took on this job. And it's such a lovely thing to do, to just be that sort of gateway to life in the parish and the community. We've got First Holy Communion and First Reconciliation, the confirmation. And that's probably the area that I spend most of my energies on, in that we've got big groups of very wonderful catechists helping with First Holy Communion and certainly RCIA. But confirmation is that age group that people actually find it difficult to sort of commit to that age group sometimes. But they're wonderful. There's lots you can glean in those moments. And then we have a very strong and vibrant RCIA group every year. I also do some youth ministry here. So I developed a youth night. I liaise quite a bit with the local schools, and I bring the primary children on retreats, a class at a time, just to really share with them about the love of God. I think that's the thing that drives me. I'm a teacher by trade, so I have taught for the diocese in very many places. And the kernel of that actually was youth work. I started in youth ministry with the Spec Retreat Centre. I just feel they're kind of one and the same in a way. Moving through all of those things has led me to to what I'm doing now. And I think that the most important thing about being a coordinator is trying to sort of engage with all of those different groups and bring the love of God into all of those spaces, to try and build community, to share faith, to share the good news, to be a positive link in the parish.
Great. Now, I've got two things to ask you about that, Sophie.
Please.
First of all, we were talking about the parish being diverse, people with all sorts of different heritages. Presumably, you've got to think about that when you're putting together programmes for the different sacramental preparations and things, and for RCIA. Is there anything that, for the people in that situation, ideas you might have about how to make everybody feel welcome? One of the reasons I'm asking is many, many years ago, I was a First Communion catechist, and we had one family who came from Samoa, and the family were really keen that their child wore a white suit for his First Communion, because that's what they did at home, and she thought it just looked beautiful, and for her, that's what First Communion was. But of course, no one else was doing that, and she just didn't quite have the courage, I think, on the day to dress him in a white suit. You know, I just think about it sometimes that somehow we need to make all cultural expressions of our faith welcome, and I just wonder if you have any advice about that.
I wouldn't say there's anything specifically we do. I mean, I'd like to think that if someone comes to us with a concern or a problem or a desire for something, then we would have that conversation and talk through it. I mean, I think, you know, there have been issues with sometimes a language barrier or some particular need that someone has. I think it's just about being ready to respond. I'd say it's almost a sort of a case-by-case basis. The messaging is the same in a sense, and it's just finding the right way for each person in that setting. I mean, I think when it comes to the adults and doing RCIA, it's more about listening and I think just sharing stories and giving people the opportunity to, you know, to share what's on their hearts.
That sounds like, you know, the relationships are important, aren't they? And so just being there, building relationships with people who are coming for the programmes helps you to find out those things.
Well, and having this role, I mean, I think where maybe a church doesn't have a coordinator's role, that's left to the priests, which is all well and good. There's some lovely priests out there doing a tremendous amount of work, but they can be really busy as well.
Yeah.
And just sort of being around to, you know, you get that email of someone reaching out for the first time and they've never stepped foot in the Catholic Church, but they've looked us up online or something and they want to know more. And then you can have that initial conversation. Or a new family coming into the parish. Maybe they're not at the Catholic school, so they're kind of feeling a bit at sea, and you can meet with them, show that I do a lot of little tours of the church, especially with children who are coming through maybe from a slightly different setting or with a particular need. And it's lovely to be able to sort of create that welcome. So that's a real privilege to meet families and individuals. It's a blessing to be part of that journey.
That's great. That brings me on to my second thing, actually, which is really helpful. I'm a big fan of church tours myself. A friend of me are doing some work in our parish encouraging people interested in becoming Catholics, and we start with looking around the church and talking about things. And I just think for some people, being able to talk to somebody, especially if they don't have much knowledge about the church already, we don't already have shared vocabulary and practices and things, it can be hard, can't it, to know how to begin that conversation. So again, I'm looking for your advice, Sophie, and I'm wondering if you can just give people an idea. If people feel really stuck, what is it you can do? What is it you can say that is going to engage the person and not sound too technical or isn't actually sharing the gospel? You know, you can also do kind of platitudes, can't you, which is not really sharing the gospel. So how do you get that right?
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, in Catholicism, there's a special word for everything, isn't there? I think, our church is particularly beautiful. It's just got that kind of feel about it that you do come and you think this is a special space. I think just allowing people, especially children, to just kind of soak up the space, the atmosphere, rather than trying to put a word and a name to everything. But yeah, with younger children, I think I do a little bit of a finding game or something where we then can talk about each thing and try and engage people, everyone actually, adults or children, with a story or an example that would come from their own life. I often talk when we dip our hand in the fonts and come in and I talk about that. I say, well, we're making the sign of the cross in the same way we're saying we belong to Jesus in the Trinity, in the same way that you'd put on your football shirt and you're supporting your local football team, right. And try and just use some of those examples. So it's not just, you're not just saying the name and that's what it is and move on. Often with small children, I talk about when we're genuflecting what that means, that we're kneeling to the king. Just like in the olden days, they used to sort of bow to the king, just to create this kind of sense of, right, I can see where that's come from. I think I've got a creative edge there, and I think if anyone can find a little nugget that would link to sometimes real life or a story that they can relate to, that just kind of would help them to understand why we do things, how we do things, I think that really helps.
Okay.
You can talk about the statues or pictures being like photographs that you'd have in your pocket of a loved one, and I think that can explain something nicely. So just to sort of take it beyond what we just, of course, let them see and hear and just get the feel of a building, because I think there is something about special sacred spaces, but also to try and use those stories or little analogies or whatever just to ground it in something.
That's great. Thank you, Sophie. In the less grounded world of the digital space, we were talking before about how some evangelization now is online, is digital, and we have people coming to church sometimes whose experience so far has been finding out about the faith online, possibly in a very mixed bag way, as to what they've experienced. They arrive in the parish and we need to somehow make a connection with real life and real faith experiences.
Yes.
How do you begin to do that?
Certainly COVID was the sort of jumping off point, I think, for a lot of good Catholic content being created, a lot more sort of digital presence. We were talking about the fact that I think it goes back to John Paul II, who was such an advocate for communication. He created in here a day for prayer for communications. And I think there's so many wonderful digital resources. I mean, it's so enriching for the church. I love it. And yes, we do have quite a number of people coming through, particularly the RCIA, looking to become a Catholic or be received into the Catholic Church, who have discovered Catholicism online. It started in COVID, and you felt there was almost, and not just that we felt a bit lonely in COVID, but there was time to look and to research. So lots of people coming, and actually who ended up being quite aware of what there was from all of the stuff that they consumed online. And then to come through to sort of in-person meetings, it's wonderful, actually, because then you have the chance to share and listen to each other. And some people come with all the head knowledge. They've looked at all the videos and all the YouTube clips, but now they're coming to see how that fits into the life of the parish and the mass and the community. And other people coming with almost nothing. Sometimes they haven't looked at online. They've just had a feeling of faith and of feeling belonging or being attracted to the Catholic Church in some way. So it's something about bringing, especially those that have come, having taken a lot online. I mean, The Chosen, for example, is a really great entry point for lots of people in the online space.
Love The Chosen.
It's amazing. I mean, it's so amazing. That's still a sort of fictional drama in a sense. I mean, and they bring out a little bit of fiction into the biblical sort of aspect of it. But I suppose it's marrying that with what can, from the Catholic point of view, be quite structured liturgy, ways of praying. Just having that space in the RCIA sessions to sort of pick that apart a bit, and the importance of it not just remaining as faith online, but inviting those people having discovered faith online to explore the community aspects and the real life stories, the smells, the bells, the sounds, the music, all of that richness that comes with being in Mass. Because actually a lot of people will have the online stuff. They'll even come to the RCIA sessions and come for that inquiry period and have not really felt to step foot properly in regularly. Some of them are, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And that first step, often we have the rite of acceptance in January after a period of inquiry. And for some of them, that's their first welcome. And then so the journey is only just beginning of discovering the riches of the liturgy and of the Eucharist and that invitation to the table of the Lord that Jesus invites us to. So I have to say, I think there's work that we can all do in parishes, especially as mystagogia sort of starts when they're kind of now moving into being the new Catholics that they are. And it's finding ways in which to get them realising that they're now in the community and they can be part of other things. And it's a challenge because you want that people feel a part of it. You want that people feel they're part of the community and not just an add-on or, oh yeah, I had a great year of RCIA and now I don't know what to do with myself. I do think building community is really vital, and I certainly in my role haven't quite got it right, but together as a church and a wider church, I think in the digital age, going back to that, we need to make sure that we're prioritising human encounter, that we meet face to face, that we can eyeball each other, that we can have small group discussion. And it's always very rich. And of course, there's some wonderful things about the online opportunities we now have. We've got live stream here, which is great. We get people tuning into their grandchild's first Holy Communion from all sorts of different countries. But there's nothing that can replace being here in the space.
Yeah, I think there's something about it's going back to encounter, isn't it? We encounter each other and it's not really the same kind of encounter if it's only digital.
Yeah, and I think certainly in the UK, because I've had some experience of being abroad, but I think it's easy to almost lose confidence to kind of speak to someone. Would you like to come to Mass with me? Or for someone to ring someone and say, look, I don't go to Mass often, or I'm nervous about where to look, where to stand, where to sit, And so that's something I'd love to develop in this parish. There is something about just sort of widening out the net and, widening those tent pegs. And
the other side of that is about the digital space, which you have spoken about a little bit, but we've had a piece of work in our diocese about the cathedral in Nottingham, did some work building its social media profile. The diocese is saying this has worked really well, that people are coming to the cathedral because they've seen online what it's like to be there. Yeah. They've kind of had a little gentle introduction by seeing the dean of the cathedral strolling about in there and pointing out things and real people milling, and it's given them some confidence to then go there. And then some of those people have joined the RCIA programme and things. So that digital presence is important. I think that's right. I think people are finding that. And I think sometimes the first thing people want to do if they see a church they might be interested in is find a Facebook page about it and feel some familiarity before they dare go in. Because we, like you say, we've lost some confidence there, haven't we, to actually just go in. But we also were talking earlier about some of the dangers of the digital world, the impact of that on our children.
Yeah.
And I know this is something very close to your heart. So maybe tell us a bit about this work you're doing about smartphones and children. And I know you were saying that the kind of connection to our faith, you're still working through that a little bit. But let's see where you're at with it.
It's a separate hat to my catechetical coordinator hat, so it's a voluntary role, but I go about it with the same desire. And actually it comes from my Catholic faith, is the desire to see a person fully alive. I mean, that's what we want, the glory of God fully alive in every person. And so my work it's an organisation called Smartphone Free Childhood. They're not religious in any way, but I came across them because two mums were discussing this sense of feeling the pressure of having to hand their children a smartphone. That kind of went viral, and now there are thousands of people that have sort of signed up to this grassroots organisation. But my involvement with it, from my faith point of view, it really comes down to human dignity, the person, and respect and lifting up the person, celebrating the person, where there are some really amazing things about the online space. Some of the harms, especially to children, would be, the addictive quality, not just of smartphones, but of any device, It's the inappropriate content that is now so accessible. I mean, they talk about giving a smartphone to a child is like giving them a big bag of sweets and saying, here you are. And they can't help themselves. I mean, the addictive nature of the phone is there. And it's also like a supercomputer in your pocket. So I heard the analogy from a speaker who talks about the problem of pornography. He was saying it's like when you give a smartphone to your child, it's like sending them into a city and saying, go anywhere. Now, of course, we don't mind our children going to Hamleys or going to see, one of the sites in London, but we'd much rather them go to the red light district or, into a slightly dodgier area. We never would do that. But yet we're allowing that in the online space. So apart from the addictive quality and the inappropriate content, I mean, you've also got the huge mental health impact that it's having, I think exacerbated by COVID, of course. We're lonelier. That sense of community has been lost. And I don't think it's just the introduction of the digital world, but that has added to it. And then finally, we talk about the opportunity cost. So it's what you're missing out on if you weren't spending hours on your smartphone, which of course, as an adult, you'd hope you've got the kind of tools to be a bit more discerning about it. But when it comes to children especially, certainly I'm a parent of 5 children, you want to protect your children from some of the harms whilst they enjoy some of the good. It's a real balance. And I think from a Christian point of view, and as I say, I'm just working out my theology of the internet or theology of phones or something, there is something in the catechism about communication and how we communicate. We can understand that there's something really important. And actually, it comes from a book that's not religious at all. Jonathan Haidt is, I think, a psychologist in America who has written about this in a book called The Anxious Generation. And he talks about the fact that when you're in the social space, you're disembodied. You're actually, you almost separated those things. And actually, there is something really important about, in-person, face-to-face encounter. And we use that word a lot in religious circles, but it's so important because that's what we're missing, is that real embodied encounter with someone, which means that online we think we control someone and say everything that we would not say to their face because we've kind of lost that sense of of what it means to really encounter someone face to face, heart to heart. And I think that's where the Catholic Church has got so many riches to share in terms of its teaching about human dignity. We're not just a body walking around. We're not just a soul floating around. We're body and soul. We're created in the image and likeness of God. We've been imbued with a spark of the divine within us. If we just sort of settle for, leave a child to stare at a screen for hours on end, what are we doing? They're missing out on those other in-person, real life encounters. So I think there's more to explore there. I don't have it all sort of mapped out. Maybe this is for the listeners can kind of go away and mull this over as well. Yeah. Is bringing that, because the government have talks on a governmental level about banning social media under 16s, and there's all sorts of conversation there now in the political space as well as in the parental and the school space. But I think as Catholics, I want to bring faith into all aspects of my life. What can we offer as Catholics? I think there's something so unique and so distinctive about what we can offer the world through our example, through the way that we challenge perceptions, the norms. I think we've got a lot to say, and I think we need to be less apologetic about it. But to do it not in a brash way or in a wagging the finger sort of way, but just seeing how can we bring the positivity of the messages about the dignity of the human person in its totality to the world.
Thank you, Sophie. Well, you're all over it. And I see that it's an ongoing conversation that we're all part of, but you brought a lot to it. Thank you. I was reminded when you were talking about being disembodied in the digital space. I think that is very insightful. It reminded me of during COVID, when we were having to go to Mass online, somebody had put on their social media, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore because I sat down to watch Mass with a cup of tea. And he said, I just thought, what am I doing? What am I doing?
It was really damaging to our spirit in a way.
Yes.
There's nothing that can replace being together.
Of course, if you can't be at Mass in person.
Of course, yeah.
But I think there is a really important conversation about when we can be in person, let us be in person.
Yes, yes.
Because it is like you say, our whole body needs to be there. And also something about us being built for a relationship. It's not digital relationship that we're built for.
Completely.
It is those eyeball to eyeball.
Yeah, it'll be somehow an extension of the theology of the body in some way, which I know talks about maybe more sexuality in relationships, but actually relationship in general is so important. But our faith is based in that, isn't it? It's based on a relationship. God wants to be in a relationship with us. He sent his son in such a miraculous way. I mean, I feel jealous of those people who lived 2,000 years ago who shook his hand and, tapped him on the shoulder and say, go Jesus, or whatever. I'd have loved to have been there. Thank goodness I've been gifted with faith for that and the enthusiasm for it. Even the physical suffering that Jesus had to go through. I introduced my children to the Passion of the Christ this year, and some of them are fairly little, but I thought there's something powerful about this movie. It's very earthy, the stuff that happens to Jesus. But that stuff, and that he allowed it to happen to his physical body, that's the source and summit of our faith, isn't it? He died for us, he rose for us, he's here with us through the power of the Holy Spirit. There's so many layers to it. You can't separate body and spirit. Our faith is a relationship, and a relationship with a person. When I say I love you, it's not just words. I give a hug. It's a feeling I have with someone. It's a connection. It's not just one or the other. And you can't sometimes separate those things either. The connection is bodily and it's emotional, it's spiritual. And the same with God. I can be told everything about my faith. Again, I can look at all online, I can read all the books, I can get the T-shirt, I can have done the theology degree, but sometimes it's leading us all, isn't it, from a place of head to heart. It's a lifelong journey, isn't it? Yeah. Prayer has to come in, and then just standing in that church and going, wow, or standing by a sunset and going, wow, or standing at World Youth Day with 2 million other young people and going, wow. The wow is what we sometimes shut ourselves off from with everything else that's going on in life.
Well, let me do a wow of my own, Sophie. It's been lovely talking to you. Just before we close, I often ask people about if there's a favourite piece of scripture or prayer or practice that really supports them. Is there something that comes to your mind?
So when I was little, we had some really lovely honorary grandparents, Lois and Ray. They're both now passed, wonderful people. They're not Catholics. They were Protestant, very fervent, very active in their church. And we used to go and visit them often. They gave me one of my first Bibles, and on the front cover, and it's something that has always stuck with me, this image, it had the birds and the trees, and it was Matthew 6:25, which is why worry? the birds and the flowers are given everything. Why should we worry about what food we're going to eat, about what we're going to drink, about how we're going to clothe ourselves? And every time I get a new Bible, I make sure I can see that quote. It was like a first time really dive into some of the riches of the Bible for me, that particular quote. I suppose it links with the way I felt they honoured me as a young person, a child really at the time, wanting to discover faith with me by giving me that gift of the Bible. Just the love that was shared in that moment of the gift of the Bible, and then seeing within the Bible some of those lovely treasures. That quote has always stuck with me, is why worry? And I think I try and go through life like that. Of course, I have lots of worries. I have hang-ups about things, worry about my children, all sorts. But yet, deep inside, in the still small centre of the storm that is life sometimes, that's the quote that keeps me on the straight and narrow and helps me know that God is there.
Thank you, Sophie. That's been an amazing conversation. And it's really interesting that we were talking about anxiety among young people today, the harms of the internet world, and actually that why worry has stood you in good stead and helped you find a way through. So it's been fantastic talking to you. There's a lot of richness in this conversation, which I hope listeners will find things that resonate with them. And we haven't even got on to some of the things we wanted to talk about.
I'll have to come back for part 2,
well, maybe
Teresa.
we'll have another episode sometime, Sophie. I think there's more to be dug out here in this conversation. I've really enjoyed it, and I know that listeners are going to enjoy this episode. So thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Teresa. Take care. God bless.
Thanks so much for joining me on All Kinds of Catholic this time. I hope today's conversation has resonated with you. A new episode is released each Wednesday, and you can follow All Kinds of Catholic on the usual podcast platforms. Rate and review to help others find it. You can also follow us on social media at Kinds of Catholic. And remember, if you connect with us on Substack, you can comment on episodes and share your thoughts and be part of the dialogue there. Until the next time.